This is an attempt, the first one actually, to produce an audible version of the Crackerhead Chronicles in my own voice. If it is not already, it will soon become obvious that I don't know much about audio engineering, video editing, nor digital graphics. I have that on good authority, I'm told. Of course, my darling wife Arlinda would be a whole lot more enthusiastic about this project if I sounded a whole lot more like the celebrated American actor Sam Elliott. Hmm, I wonder if there's an app for that. Anyway, let's move on to the third crumb, Dad. The name of my dad is Fred Marshall Buterbaugh. He was born on February 4th, 1920, in the small farming community of Blue Mound, Kansas, which is around 65 miles south of Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri. I do not remember if he was born in a hospital or not, but it sure wasn't under the same conditions as my mom was. For my dad's family was much better off than hers in a number of ways. Sadly, I do not know all that much more about my dad's lineage than I do my mom's, for I did get to actually meet his mother just before she passed away, and I got to have a fairly close relationship with two of his sisters, but there is so much that is still a mystery to me. What I do know is that Buterbaugh is Dutch, Pennsylvania Dutch, if you are so inclined, for I can remember my dad getting real upset over me telling him that the name was Germanic in origin. Okay, the Pennsylvania Dutch part is on me, for my dad's bunch eventually settled in the Lancaster County area of Pennsylvania after coming over here from the old country, and I thought it was a nice touch. Whether or not they were Mennonite, I do not know, for my dad's mother and father considered themselves to be non-denominational, easy for someone else to say, Christians, and I was not made aware of any evidence of what prior generations were. Neither do I know just when they came over, but it had to have been before the Civil War, for Samuel Buterbaugh, same name with a different spelling, served under Union General Sherman on his march to the sea through Georgia and South Carolina. After the war, he rode under General Sheridan in a U.S. Army cavalry unit and later became one of the earliest settlers of Kearney, Nebraska. My dad's father was raised in Omaha, Nebraska, and how he came to settle in Blue Mound, Kansas is another part of the mystery. The same can be said of where he met my dad's mother, who was about as Danish as one can be. Anyway, there's no mystery where the anger of my dad over me insisting that Buterbaugh is a Germanic name came from, for he served with the 1st Infantry Division of the U.S. Army during World War II, and saw his first action when he went ashore on Omaha Beach with the second wave of the division on June 6, 1944, D-Day. Furthermore, severe wounds that he received while out on patrol in the Ardennes forest region of Belgium several months later at the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge landed him in a hospital in Paris, France for several weeks. It could be argued that being wounded like that saved his life, for when he woke up in the hospital, he saw his first sergeant lying in a bed across from him, and when he asked him what he was doing there, his first sergeant told him that they were the only survivors from their company, for what ones were not shot first were crushed to death by the German tanks that had rolled straight over their position a day or so after he was wounded. As if that was not enough, when he was released from the hospital, my dad was assigned to another unit that helped liberate the Buchenwald concentration camp in Germany. The only thing that he really had to say about it was that it was then that he was glad that the Army had stuck a rifle in his hand instead of letting him do what he knew the best, which was run a bulldozer. You see, my dad was a pipeliner, which is someone who travels around the country, the world actually, building pipelines for the transport of such things as natural gas and oil. They can be heavy equipment operators, welders, and a host of other things, and my dad was a master bulldozer man until back problems forced him to start operating a ditching machine a few years before those back problems forced him off of the job completely. It all started when his sister Maxine married Paul Williams, who was a full-blooded Choctaw from the reservation in Oklahoma. Uncle Paul was also a pipeliner, and he got my dad jobs as a bulldozer greaser during summer vacations from school. From then on, my dad was hooked, for the money was very good, especially during the days of the Depression, and tales of faraway places like South Carolina and Connecticut fueled the imagination of a boy who knew only the prairie of eastern Kansas. No, not even an offer of a full scholarship to play basketball for Fog Allen at Kansas University, Rock Chalk J Hawk KU, could dissuade my dad, for he was going to be a pipeliner and be the best bulldozer operator that had ever been seen. Speaking of my dad playing basketball, he once told of his high school team getting beat 100-2 and that he had scored the only points for his team on a pair of free throws. The rest of the story was that the principal called the entire school to an assembly, and after placing the members of the basketball team in chairs behind him so that they could be clearly seen by all, he then proceeded to declare in no uncertain terms that he would dissolve the team and forfeit the rest of the games if anything even remotely like that 100-2 defeat happened again. Considering the fact that my dad was the shortest player on the team at 6 feet tall, and that the rest of the starting lineup consisted of two at 6 feet 10 inches tall and two at 6 feet 7 inches tall, who could blame him? No, I cannot blame you for thinking that his story is quite a tall tale in and of itself, for there being so many white boys that tall around a very small eastern Kansas farming community back in the 1930s is hard to imagine. On the other hand, my wife and I saw an older gentleman who appeared to have been born around the same time as my dad have to duck to go under a 7 foot tall doorway in a restaurant in Liberal, Kansas one night. So maybe they just knew how to feed 'em right back then. My dad was also quite a shortstop for his Blue Mound High School baseball team. In fact, he even got some offers to play in the St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Browns, that became the Baltimore Orioles in 1954, and Chicago Cubs farm systems. But the money they were talking about was not nearly as much as he was already making pipelining. So, after sticking around Blue Mound for a year or so to care for his ailing parents upon his return from the war, my dad returned to the life that he loved. Granted, it was a lonely one, but that all changed when he met a red-headed Cherokee from Arkansas in 1951.